My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, at the end of chapter 24 of the Gospel of St. Matthew, the Lord speaks about his second coming, about the eventual judgment, and the fact that we will have to give an account of everything that we have received in this life. It's really a stirring call to responsibility, not to fear or meant to force us into some kind of submission. That was chapter 24, but today in chapter 25, we see the practical application of this reality of judgment. And this is seen in the parable of the talents, where we have different men with different talents, one with 5 talents, another with 2 talents, and then one with 1 talent. Of course, we all intuit that we're all different, and we have different strengths and abilities. Some people are very good in math, others in arts, and have a great ability to speak. And when we're young, it's kind of hard to identify this because these things come so naturally to us. But we also understand that talents are indeed a treasure that must be both safeguarded and developed. Otherwise, they can really stagnate and even rot. Like that servant who had just 1 talent. Well, the gospel says that he went off and dug a hole in the ground and buried his master's money. But what's it going to do there in the ground? And it's just going to sit there and rot. And notice that it says that it was not his money, it was his master's money. And indeed, our talents are really not really our own. They are given to us as gifts from God. And, well, there's surely lots of people out there with many talents, from, artistic flair to intellectual ability and, physical talents. But each one is called to develop that talent and make it grow from what it is now to what it can become. And so we ask, Lord, is there any talent that I've dug into the ground that I have not really developed? Whether it's, human talents or even something like our faith. Maybe I haven't developed my faith enough. I just read a story about a bishop, an Anglican bishop from the Church of England, who just recently resigned from his bishopric and entered the Catholic Church into full communion. He's like 60 years old, he's married, and he'd been discerning for a while, and he decided to take this step. And, well, many converts, when they decide to do something like this, were helped by the writings of some saints, and in the case of the Anglican Church, many were helped by the writings of St. John Henry Newman. He too converted in 1850 in England, and he has been read by many because he had used his talent of writing, and many were later influenced by his sermons. He invested a lot of time and energy into this. He worked long hours on his texts, and he wrote his famous Apologia Pro Vita Sua, where he was responding to one of his critics. And in other words, all those texts and all that effort that he put, many years ago, are still bearing fruit today. More than 100 years later, and probably will continue to bear fruit. And indeed, it is always very sad, really, to see wasted talent, because people never really plan to squander their talents. It's not something they decide to do. And this parable is so vivid that it's easy to apply to ourselves. And it naturally leads us to that question: what talents have I not developed? Because we all have our abilities, our strengths, and is it possible there's something that I have not fine-tuned, or an ability that I've just stayed a little bit clumsy with, or have not trained myself, or formed myself, or learned more on something? And we would do well to develop our talents, but for us to do that, well, we all need a deeper sense of urgency. And those 2 servants in the parable, the one with the 5 talents and the one with the 2, they didn't waste any time. They had strategies. They wanted to make their master happy. And they had a deep sense of responsibility. But, some people, like the one with the one talent, maybe they have a kind of more comfortable life or no sense of urgency at all. Maybe they feel quite sheltered. Like I read the story about an instructor in a military academy in the U.S. who saw many, many recruits over the decades. And he said that he observed something because over the years that he trained all these recruits, he saw recruits from the 1950s and 60s, and what he saw often were pretty relaxed students, and some of the instructors were wondering, well, these guys are really relaxed. Are they ever even going to get through this training? But he said that apparently in 1965, attitudes changed, and suddenly the recruits started studying more intently, and they took notes and stuff, and they were more better students, and the syllabus had not changed. The faculty had not changed, but he said these recruits were now more conscious of the fact that they were headed towards the front lines of war. So that meant that they had a deeper sense of urgency of preparing themselves. And, well, we too are in some ways never far from those front lines in this war of peace, this war in which we have to battle against the devil's schemes and put on the armor of God, as St. Paul says. Or perhaps we remember that beautiful point, the first point from The Way by St. Josemaria. It has different translations, and I always feel it's kind of like an electroshock when you read it. It's kind of like a jolt to any faith that might be slumbering along. He says, and I always invite people to read the first point, but here I go. He says, point number 1 of The Way: don't let your life be barren, or sometimes be sterile. Be useful, he says. Blaze a trail. Shine forth with the light of your faith and your love. With your apostolic life, wipe out the trail of filth and slime left by the impure sowers of hatred, and light up, or set aflame, all the ways of the earth with the fire of Christ that you bear in your heart. Lord, I don't want to have a life that is barren, or neither humanly speaking nor supernaturally. And I know you've entrusted me with something, and I have to maybe dig up some talent that I have just put in the ground. I mean, imagine you're given a plot of land in the city. I've seen this. Some cities have gas stations that have been shut down. And often these gas stations were on important intersections. But now, to build there, the city requires the ground to be decontaminated, because there was a gas station there for years, right? So, to decontaminate land like that, well, it's a big investment. So often they don't do anything about it. They just sort of leave these as empty fields. Garbage piles up. People scribble graffiti here and there. The city surrounds it with cement blocks, so you can't even park there. Right? But also, somebody with, a real sort of spirit of responsibility could say, okay, well, what are the needs here? And take a risk of investing in this plot of land. Maybe you could build an arena. You could build a proper senior's home, a soup kitchen, a decent-looking apartment, a greenhouse. I don't know, whatever. A good project. But that will require negotiation, maybe fundraising, investing, other complications. But we have to think it must be really useful. It's as though God doesn't want mere passivity from our life, or the safety of not taking risks. Is it possible that the Lord will say to me, I gave you this precious seed, and I was hoping that with your freedom, your sense of responsibility, that you could develop this. But in the end, what was wrong with that servant with the one talent? What was wrong? The problem was not that he only had one talent. The problem was he had a wrong-headed idea of God. He said, I was afraid because you were a demanding man, demanding master. You harvest where you did not plant. See what can happen if we have a wrong idea of God? And, if particularly what happens when we forget the truth that he is our Father. We are his sons and daughters. Of course, if you think like this servant, if you think that God is a super demanding, always ticked off at our very existence and rolling our eyes when we try anything, of course, you're going to be afraid. But that's not God. God is a loving Father. Because fear always paralyzes. It immobilizes and kind of leads to indolence, a kind of weird immobility. If I can't do this perfectly, I might as well drop it, we might say. Well, let us ask our blessed Lord, help me to blaze a trail with what you have given me. And our Blessed Mother, and today, Saint Monica will intercede for us so that we really set the world on fire. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.